My name is Susan Miller and I work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm a fish and wildlife biologist and I work in the Sandhills region of the state of North Carolina. I've worked with red-cockaded woodpeckers for just over 20 years now. I started as a technician at Fort Bragg with their endangered species program and moved to the Fish and Wildlife Service about 14 years ago and have done intensive monitoring for many years. Red-cockaded woodpeckers are one of 8 species of woodpecker that live in North Carolina. They're unique because they're the only species, not just the only bird, but the only species that creates a cavity for roosting and nesting in a live pine tree. They historically occurred across most of the southeastern United States. There's even records they may have existed all the way into the New Jersey pine barrens. They are closely associated with pine habitat. They definitely prefer longleaf pine, but will live and exist in any type of pine habitat that's available. And we're in the Sandhills region of North Carolina where longleaf pine is the dominant pine species. Longleaf once covered over 90 million acres across the southeast, and red-cockadeds were found throughout that entire region. It's estimated with the acreage of about 90 million acres that historically there would have been about 1.4 million family groups of red-cockaded woodpeckers. A family group would consist of a male and female breeding pair, and then they often have helpers, usually male helpers, that stay within the family group and help do all the same duties that the adults do except for breeding. So a family group would occupy a territory in the longleaf system. They all would create cavities, they all defend territory, they all help raise and incubate young, feed young. Red-cockaded woodpeckers need large patches of intact forest. They prefer pine species, especially longleaf pine. They need older growth trees in order to create cavities because they're the only species that create a cavity within a living pine tree. Those trees that they put cavities in have to have a small amount of sapwood, a larger amount of deadwood or heartwood in the middle of the tree where the cavity is contained, and it takes an older tree to have those right characteristics in order to create those cavities. The reason that we believe the red-cockadeds have evolved this adaptation of creating cavities in living pine trees is because of the fire-maintained environment that they live in. The southeast is a fire-maintained ecosystem. Fires were very frequent. Every 3 to 5 years, fires would ignite from lightning fires or lightning strikes, usually in the spring or summer. Most woodpecker species that live in the southeast create cavities in snags or dead standing timber. Red-cockadeds are unique because they evolved in this fire-maintained ecosystem and learned to use the pine trees that persist through these fires and create cavities so that they can be there for many generations. So red-cockaded woodpeckers evolved with fire, and fire is an important management tool that we use to maintain habitat. They need larger trees such as these longleaf behind me to forage on. They also need larger trees with smaller amounts of sapwood or older trees in order to create cavities in for roosting and nesting. And fire helps maintain the openness of this habitat. And if you look through this area, you can see that there's lots of wiregrass, and it's very open. The wiregrass that's on the ground helps provide place for the insect diversity that then makes its way up the tree, which is what the woodpeckers then feed on. The openness is important. It helps maintain their sight ability to look for predators that may be on the prowl in the area. It also, by having an open environment like this, it helps prevent from having places where critters such as snakes that might crawl up the side of a cavity tree to feed on the nestlings can't just go up one tree and right over to another tree that's nearby. If you look at an active cavity tree, it would have lots of sap flow down the trunk of the tree, and that's to prevent predators such as tree climbing snakes from getting into the cavity and eating the young. So the openness of the habitat is very important, and fire helps maintain that diversity and helps maintain all the native ground cover that's very important for the insect diversity to provide forage.